I thought I'd start with the Grandmaster title. You see, back in the 80s, the Grandmaster title was the one thing that eluded Indians. No Indian had ever become a Grandmaster. So anyone who started, that was the first question you had to answer: when will India have a Grandmaster? And around about 84, 85, I finally completed the International Master title, which is the one below that. So I got to start trying to make a Grandmaster title. You make a Grandmaster title basically by attaining 2 or 3 Grandmaster results, totaling 24 games. So the idea is you can make it over 9 games, and then you'll need a third one of 9 games. Or you can make 11 and 13, in which case it's 2 results. So 2 or 3 results. And there are some other details that the tournament needs, rules that the tournament needs to fulfill, but essentially that was it. So I started in early 86 trying to get a Grandmaster result. And in my very first tournament in Calcutta, actually, I missed it by half a point, so just the bare minimum. Then that repeated again in London. It kept repeating over and over again. I would keep missing the Grandmaster result by about half a point. And in 87, I actually had to stop this process of going through from tournament to tournament, and because my school exams were coming up in 87. And I actually had to do this with the +2 exam, so I actually had to do that and then think about college. So I took 3 months off from Jan, and then went back to class and was trying to catch up furiously with studies. And then the thing I found that I was actually relieved to stop searching for the GM title for a while, and I genuinely enjoyed studying for a change. That sounds funny, but I think you also know that if you have to do something for only 3 months, it's easier to keep your motivation high for that than if you had to do it from June to June or something like that. So I was not only very happy in school, desperately trying to catch up, but I was also happy to leave chess behind for a while. And then what happened was, the first tournament I missed again after finishing my exams, but after that quick succession, I won the World Junior Championship, and then in 2 tournaments I finished my Grandmaster title, literally consecutively. So I mean, it was clear to me that taking these 3 months away had somehow allowed me to come back with a certain hunger. And by the end of 86, though I was working very hard towards the title, I think it was getting pretty stale, almost mechanical. You go to every tournament, you feel you have to try in a certain way, and you do it. But after taking 3 months off for the exams, I seemed to enjoy it more suddenly, and everything sort of fell into place very quickly. So I got my title December 87, and then literally in every tournament in 1988, I did badly. And I did so badly that I would not have made a Grandmaster result in 1988 till about July, August. And then I spoke to some other Grandmasters, and they said, yeah, it's the first thing that happened to us. You become a GM and then you just lose the thread completely. I think what happened was, in 86 and 87, in every tournament I went, I knew what my target was. I had a GM result is a fixed number. So if it's 10 games, it can be 7 points, or 6.5, or 7.5, depending on the strength of the opposition. But essentially, it's a fixed number. So as soon as you got to tournament, you had a nice little target. In 88, suddenly I had no target. I mean, I could make less than the GM result. It wouldn't really matter. Your title is for life. So I found that very disorienting. I mean, you think it's enough to just want to do well, but when you have such nice calibration before that, and suddenly you don't have anything to aim for, I found that tricky. That also passed. After a while, you understand that you need to move on to other things, and so the next 2 years, I pretty much just enjoyed myself traveling. Because I was a GM, lots of doors had opened for me. I could go to nice tournaments, travel. Well, okay, when you're 18 and 19, it's not too bad. So that went on till about 1990. And then I had to qualify for the next World Championship cycle. So I had to play a tournament in Manila. And things went very well because I was just on a kind of roll by that point. And I qualified for the World Championship. Psychology again opened completely new doors. Suddenly, instead of going to just good tournaments, I was going to the best tournaments. And you were getting excellent invitations and so on. So, in '91, I started to actually play very well, and I beat Karpov and Kasparov for the first time in tournaments. And something funny happened there, which is that the whole of 1990, they've been talking about what a promising youngster I was and how I was a new Asian hope and so on. And then after I beat them, they started saying that I was a bit of a coffee house player and I can't be taken very seriously, and I have huge defects in my play which need to be rectified and what have you. And I was speaking to a friend and he said, of course it's the biggest compliment because it's only when they attack you that you actually represent any sort of danger to them. So that was nice. It then took me a further 9 years to become world champion for the first time. I had a couple of attempts in 1995 when I played Kasparov, and in 98 as well I came close, but it was only in 2000 that I became world champion. And I think it's a question of gaining experience, and even if something is within your reach, I think when it actually happens, it feels very natural in a way that it doesn't feel before. I mean, if you're surprised that you're doing something, perhaps you're not really ready for it yet. So by 2000, I had become world champion. And again, what happened to me after I became a Grandmaster happened, where initial results held up, and then I had a huge slump, which lasted me about 8 months. And no matter what I did at that point, I couldn't break free from that slump. I was experimenting all over the place, trying many things. But the problem was I was still eager to get back to being very successful. And perhaps putting a lot of pressure in that way. You want to get back so fast that you're not able to. And then so by after about 8 months, I lost my title as well. And then I went to a tournament in Prague. And by this point, reality more or less caught up with me. So I went to Prague with very low expectations. Didn't. I mean, after 8 months of doing badly, you just sort of let go. And for the first time, I could see that I was playing without any pressure. In fact, most people who would report on the event wouldn't even mention me as a favorite anymore, though it was in rapid chess. And but this helped to make it feel very relaxed. It didn't hurt that I was in Prague. So every day we'd play the game. I mean, I'd play my game, and then we'd go for nice walks around the city. And so also the atmosphere, you started to feel well again. And I won that tournament easily. And then I think for about 3 or 4 years, my results were going up. Not without speed bumps at all, but basically going up. And in 2007, I knew there'd be a World Championship match coming up. In 2001, I had a tournament where everything went horribly wrong. It was the worst tournament of my life in late 2001. And what happened was, in 2000, after winning the World Championship, I started to feel that in many tournaments I was escaping. I was getting a good result, but only because my opponents were letting me, they inexplicably make a mistake just after I'd made one. So, I was riding luck for a little while. And I didn't deal early enough with a lot of problems that had surfaced. So, and what happens when you deal with these problems immediately, then it's very healthy because, first of all, they don't accumulate, which makes it easier to deal with them. But more importantly, your rivals haven't picked up yet. So they continue to treat you with respect. And this respect is very important. It means that I can bluff once in a while. It means you get away with some stuff. You'll get draws and lost positions, and it's something worth having, let's say. It's a bit like a reputation or something. It's something that you shouldn't ignore completely. But in 2001, I kind of neglected it, and then it hit me in one tournament. And then it was too late already. I mean, during the tournament, you can't suddenly fix things. I was not able to deal with it. In 2007, the same thing happened. I spent about 3 years where basically my black repertoire, so my repertoire, the black pieces, just had no problems whatsoever. And then in January in 2007, I lost 2 games to my nearest rivals, Kramnik and Topalov, both with the black pieces. So I was a bit of a, and this time I remembered that you have to start dealing with it very quickly before it sort of snowballs. So in 2007, I immediately sort of went into panic mode and tried to shut this problem down. And it more or less worked well. By the next tournament, even though I hadn't repaired this area completely, I already won that tournament. And more to the point, since I had started doing preliminary work, it was I finished much more quickly before the matches started in 2007. So the World Championship was in September that year. I took some, let's say, well-informed gambles. So instead of trying to cover all my material, I gambled heavily on the black pieces. So I spent all my energy on black and very little energy on white. So we just skimmed through white, and that paid off in Mexico City. It could have backfired as well, in which case I'd be giving you a different speech now. But it paid off, and sometimes this kind of shortcut, well, you should consider it. It's not possible to do everything equally well, and it's not even possible to do everything. So it seemed like a good idea, and it worked. So in Mexico, I became world champion. So after a break of 6 years, and then we switched from a tournament format to matches. And these matches were going to be from, first of all, against Kramnik in 2008 in Germany. And then subsequently, there were 2 more matches, but it didn't necessarily follow. So I would play the remaining matches only if I won the first one. So when I played Kramnik, I thought I did 3 things very cleverly. One was, so I'll give you a bit description of Kramnik. He was the person who beat Kasparov in a match. Kasparov had been invincible for about 15 years in matches. So what Kramnik did was he found a way to completely neutralize Kasparov's strengths. In effect, not in a single game in the match did Kasparov get a chance to play in the areas that he likes to play. And of course, it's not that easy. We all tried to do this. But I mean, the technical details of how he did it was very, very impressive. And I studied that very closely. The second thing I did was I had to take a couple of early calls. So I had the option, well, let's just say option A and B for simplicity. I could go with A, or I could go with B, or I could keep working on both areas for a couple of months. So roughly in November, I had to start working. I could keep these things going along for about 4 or 5 months, and then take a call on which my first move would be. And then I could make a well-informed decision. But I felt that I had to reverse that. I had to take a gamble again. I mean, just literally take a decision and say, I'm going to go with A, which is 1d4, and I'm not going to play e4. And the reason was, I thought that if I got into the frame of mind where I decided I'm going down this path, and I'm not going to revisit that decision ever again, then also mentally you get used to, you know that in the match d4 is going to happen, and you'll have to deal with certain things, and there's no doubt. And what I wanted to avoid is that I spend 4 months having 2 options, but not being able to get myself into that mental frame of mind of what the final option is going to be. So I decided to take a call in November, and essentially I took a gamble again. By now I was confident in myself that it's better to take a gamble like this, even if I took it in 5 minutes. And the point was, there's some pros with going with A, there's some pros with going with B, and there are cons for both positions. And I couldn't see that thinking about it would enable me to make a better decision there. The information I had available wasn't going to change significantly unless I spent 3 or 4 months. So then it's best to be flippant and just make that decision, get it over with. In a certain sense, kicking the ladder away. And then it's a lot less stressful. If you keep on with these 2 options, I felt that would be much more stressful for me. So that was the second important decision I took. And the third one was more a memory of my match with Kasparov, in that with Kasparov we played in this in the 107th floor of the World Trade Center, and there was some fire regulations which meant to play in a kind of funny glass cube rather than, because they couldn't seal any built-up areas off, so we had to put this glass cube. And in game 10, Kasparov played a very, very strong idea at the board, and then he started literally every move he'd make the move, get up, slam the door, walk out into the players area, and then come back, and the whole cube would rattle. And I kind of rationalized to myself that I shouldn't protest, because of course my first reaction was I should call the arbiter and tell her to stop this nonsense. But I decided that since I was losing anyway, this didn't make much sense. So I thought if I complain now, I will just look like an idiot when I finally resign. So I let this moment pass. But this was a big mistake. I think psychologically it's the wrong frame of mind. If you concede something, you just get into the habit of conceding. At least I've always believed after that point that that's one of the biggest mistakes I made in my life. So I would just, and I've seen other people like Karpov. I mean, he wouldn't have stood for it even if he was a queen down. He would have protested, made a big scene, and then made the point that you can't do such things. So, I mean, there were a lot of details in the negotiations and all, but this time I made sure that at least I wasn't going to get pushed around, even if sometimes I had to give them a sort of an ultimatum. So with these three things, the Kramnik match, even so, it needn't have gone as successfully as it did. It's one of the best matches I've ever played in terms of how successful it was. And it went off brilliantly. Then I would have a match 2 years later against Topalov. And again, I had to pick my fights. I had to choose what I was going to protest against and what I wasn't. So Topalov had a very convoluted method of qualifying for this match, which basically, well, a lot of legalese. He made a bid for a match. FIDE rejected the bid. Then he sued them, and then offered them a deal where he would withdraw the lawsuit if they agreed to make him a challenger for the next match. So again, I had to decide what I was going to fight and what I wasn't. So I thought, there's no point protesting this match because he's got that sewn up. I knew that FIDE wasn't keen on fighting this lawsuit at all. So I decided not to fight that one, but instead to fight for all the details I could make the decision that I'm going to play the match and then try and get much better conditions in other areas. So again, that worked well, and the match essentially boiled down. This time, since he had the experience, he could see the games I played against Kramnik, it was clear that I was not going to get away with the kind of stuff I managed to do there. Technically, my options would be far fewer. So in the Topalov match, it essentially became a battle of nerves. And the thing is, in the last round, he gambled. He decided he didn't want to go for the tie breaks. And so he gambled rather heavily in the final game and lost because, of course, well, I took advantage of this. And but in a way, when your nerves give in like that, it is a psychological issue. If you somehow start convincing yourself, I think this gamble will work, even when you know that it's irresponsible to do it in the last game, when there's no way back. I mean, gambling in the last game is the worst thing. If it's over, it's finished immediately. I think it betrays the fact that your nerves can't take the tension anymore, rather than that you're taking a big gamble. I mean, there was a difference in the gambles I mentioned earlier because they were at the beginning of the tournament. This gamble I felt was a mistake because essentially he's conceding that mentally he can't take the pressure anymore and he wants to get it over with. So I think there, simply having played so many matches, I just sat and kept on waiting. My thing was never to rush anything. And that match worked out in the very last game, though it had been a very, very difficult experience. And finally, this year I just finished a match against Gelfand, where my opponent actually chose the strategy of being a perfect sportsman. So there was nothing to worry about. I knew that his behavior would be impeccable and there would be no conflicts or anything. But at the same time, you can't lull yourself to sleep. You have to keep, you have to stay alert, because even if someone is being very friendly and nice, I mean, Gelfand is a very, very good friend of mine. We met each other for the first time in '89, and his son is about 3 weeks older than mine. So, you know, and he would always ask me about my son. So he kept the personal side completely separate, and his behavior was exemplary. So I don't want to call it a strategy, but nonetheless, I had to find a way to remember that the tension at the board is going to be high, even though there was nothing else happening. It's a different experience from the different vibe from my other matches. And again, more or less the same thing with Topalov. I was ready to go the distance. So the only thing I think is there's going to be something of attrition, then I'm going to hang in there for the long run. I mean, the team still has to do all the work and all that has to go on, but you can't allow yourself to show any weakness. And that's about the only thing I managed. And this match again came through in the last game. And I would say that it is a lottery. You get it right or you don't, and there's not much you can do beyond that. But in order to win the lottery, you do have to turn up and buy your tickets. So I think not panicking, even though it was going to the tie break, and not rushing was correct. Even though essentially my opponent followed the same strategy. So one of us had to win, and it was me. So I think that's somehow how I've dealt with all these matches, and well, I hope that was useful.
Good afternoon, sir. Firstly, congratulations for defending the world title.
Thank you.
Secondly, during the recently concluded championships, the 8th game in which you made the comeback and tied the series was just one day after Gelfand won his match. So I'd like to know what went through your mind in that one evening. How did you turn the title around?
Well, normally it's never a good evening after you lose, but this time it was particularly bad because in match terms it was a very, 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 very hard defeat to swallow. And the reason was because the first 6 games were so even and we had created so few chances that when someone took the lead, you tended to think, well, am I even going to get one chance in the remaining games? So that was the first problem. The second thing is also that even if you're more or less ready to collapse, you have to keep a poker face and sit there, because your team is sitting there, and if they get the feeling that you're mentally gone, then they may not be able to bring in the same work as they would have otherwise. So I had to, even at the cost of really just holding my breath, I had to look calm and nonchalant about everything. And you could see the team was also panicking a bit because they also saw the technical situation. We had not managed to do very much till then. So, but then they worked the whole night till about 6 in the morning, and finally found some breakthrough. So you could see this urgency had crept into everyone. As for me, it just went from bad to worse because I couldn't sleep till 2:30. Though I went to sleep around midnight, I couldn't sleep till 2:30, and I woke up at 4:30. And my normal routine was to wake up at 9, work for 3 hours. So I have a quick breakfast, work for 3 hours, then go back to my room at about 12:30, sleep for 20 minutes or something, shower, have a quick lunch, and then go back to the workroom, quick review session, and then go to the game. This time I actually started working at 9 because I'd woken up so early, and then at 11 suddenly my eyes started going. So I went back to sleep, slept for 1.5 hours, much longer than I normally do, but I was obviously compensating. And so the whole routine was messed up. But at 6 o'clock they had told me that they had found some breakthrough area. So at least if you walked into what I was going to do, I would have some grounds for optimism. And the other thing is your attitude changes. If suddenly if earlier you insisted that they give you something that works 100%, Now you're happy if they give you something at work. 70% you say, well, I'll manage. Because I can't be choosy right now. We're just going to have to go with what we have. And the game went ridiculously well. Same thing happened in many of my matches. With Topolov, he won the first game, I won the second. It happened here. And in fact, in the last year, the last 5 times I lost, I won the next day. So somehow this relationship between loss and wins is holding, which is nice. And of course, this meant that I could calm down much faster. I mean, if I had drawn the 8th game, drawn the 9th, drawn the 10th, and suddenly won the 11th, of course I would still equalize the match, but those 3 days also would have been tough and edgy. For me, it was a dream scenario, and it went off ridiculously well. In terms of details, the 8th game actually went differently from what we had hoped for, so I didn't even get to use the work we had done. But sometimes it's like an intangible. You go there optimistically, and suddenly things work out, so that's kind of how it went on.
Did you ever face any social pressures, given that chess is not so much a followed game in India? So did you ever feel that you were probably got less recognition compared to some other sports people in India?
I would say I was very lucky, because the social pressure you feel fastest with your family and school. And my family was very, very supportive. I remember my parents literally allowing me to go to chess tournaments the evenings before exams. So I would finish one exam, come back home, study for an hour, then I'd go and play a chess game, come back at 9 o'clock, quickly study a little bit again, go to sleep, and then go and write my exam the next morning. And they were relaxed about that. And I hadn't realized how lucky I was till later on I would meet lots of other people. And those days it was a much more common refrain. They would say, I had a dream to be a sportsman, or this was what I was passionate about, but my parents were against it. And that's a phrase that I heard so often then. And in that sense, I was incredibly lucky, because my parents were incredibly supportive of the fact that they saw that I really liked the game, and they didn't feel like doing anything to oppose that. I was also lucky at school, where we had a vice principal who was a big sportsman. So, you play chess, and so on. But generally people got used to it, and I got used to it also as it went along. And no, I was quite lucky in that sense.
You mentioned the role of your team. So how much of a component does the team kind of play in a game like this, in a sport like this, where we just see one person?
Mm-hmm. Well, the team plays a huge part in the decisions you make at the board. So, because a lot of it has to be checked in advance, and because there's so much work nowadays, because of computers and the workload has expanded so much that you need a team just to be able to clean everything and make sure that you're not missed anything. The second thing is they can specialize in some areas that you don't, so you can compensate for that. And the third thing is simply they can give you a second opinion, a second perspective, which even the best players have their own prejudices. So if someone else keeps pointing out something contrary to your way of thinking, even if that just forces you to stop and look at it for a few more minutes, well, you might learn something. So that's generally the role of a team. But nowadays the workload is quite large. And so in the 8th game, for instance, I just kind of indicated a bit, even if, so something like this, we had a line like this going, and something like, and then we had to check in this position. I don't know if you guys are seeing anything, but anyway, in this position, like black has 3 moves, and then very soon it becomes 6 and 7 moves after my best responses. And so just getting through all that material required them to work the whole night. So it's that kind of thing. Literally, if I make a move, black has 4 alternatives, and then I have 3, and then he has 4. You can imagine the way it scales. So to get through all that material, they'll split work up. They'll say, well, I'll do this. And that's a lot of work nowadays. And even though your team isn't playing, emotionally they are connected in a way. If you're struggling at the board, they'll also feel depressed, and if you're not very optimistic, then they're not doing everything very mechanically. They quite a lot of this stuff requires many creative solutions and so on. So that's why you also have to be very conscious of their mood, even though they're not playing.
Among your contemporaries and yesteryear players, any player that you admire in the way they played?
I grew up admiring Tal and Fischer, and coincidentally, the first chess club I got in was the Tal Chess Club. So, and Bobby Fischer for kind of obvious reasons. Even though I was only 3 years old in 1972, I kind of grew up reading about him and got the. You have a question?
Which is the shortest and the longest game you've played?
Shortest is about, well, I have played games in under 5 minutes.
Okay.
But those are games that are meant to be finished in 5 minutes. I've also played games that were meant to go, let's say, 7 hours, and I finished them in 30 minutes. And I've had games back in the days when you could adjourn, start the next day, adjourn, start the next day, and so on. I've gone up to 14 hours.
14 minutes.
So 5 hours, then break, then next day, and then so on.
We'll take a few more questions. I think we're running out of time.
So
maybe
both the
2 to 3
players that
more
you
questions.
mentioned, Tal and Fischer, I believe those are attacking players, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how come that you started, you developed a reputation with black instead of white, because white is traditionally supposed to attack and black to defend, I would assume.
Yes, but you can also pick systems where black isn't defending. The thing is then, black assumes more risk that things go wrong. But when it goes well, it can go extremely well also. So typically black is supposed to respond to the fact that white is making the first move, and so black is reacting always. But there's a whole class of openings where you can counter-attack right away. So stylistically, I found those kind of openings appealing. And in fact, it's much easier to attack with black because you get to pre-select your system against what white is going to do. Whereas it's harder for white to anticipate everything that black can do.
Thank you.
One question.
Yeah, so how important is it to get new members into the team so that new ideas come in, and at the same time, it's difficult to train them and get them to the level they need to be at?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Actually, I've had the same team for the last 3 matches. It's a mix. You mentioned familiarity. The ones who are there, you don't have to explain anything anymore. So everything goes smoothly in that sense. But it seems that everybody has a finite pool of ideas that they're able to deal with. And every once in a while, you'll need a few sparks from outside just to get the team going in different areas. I think that's it's a very tricky thing to manage. But it is very, very important to. That's why I also chose guys who network well. I mean that they hang out in a lot of leagues and they play, they meet a lot of guys. And they always tell me, this guy mentioned that, this guy mentioned this guy. And then we have access to more ideas like that. But if you want to do it more systematically, of course, then you have to get him into your team.
So in a game which is so much a battle of nerves, over the years, how have you tried to build on the mental fitness and how have you tried to fortify it thus far?
The most important thing I think I can do is to sleep well. Because the most important thing for nerves is to, most of the time you end up worrying about things that don't actually happen. And it's the same case in chess. If there are 7 moves, the 7th one doesn't work the previous night, and you worry and you worry and you worry. If you could know that your opponent never even looked at that and you only looked at the 3rd move, life would be so much easier. So no, this is a serious problem. I find that generally I worry a lot the night before the game, the morning before the game. But when I actually get to the board, I can stop worrying because then you just make your moves. And if you're hesitant about moves, the thing is just to force your hand to make them. And literally then it's over. Then it's his problem to respond, and you get some. No, seriously. Psychologically, that's the most difficult thing. If you can stop worrying, it's brilliant. But otherwise, I think the main thing is to sleep without tossing and turning about your various things. If there's something that's worrying you and you're sleeping, it's terrible the next day. But if you can get 8 hours of sound sleep. So a lot of things I do are around that. I generally go to the gym after the game. Not really to be fit, but more to knock myself out and go to sleep. And if we're working too hard and there are too many problems happening, sometimes the best way to deal with it is just go for a nice walk, disconnect a bit and so on. So almost everything in chess is connected to calming down before the game. And the less you worry the previous night, the easier it is on your the next while you're playing as well. So because it adds up during a tournament.
I think one last question from this side.
Good evening, sir. Good afternoon. Actually, I would like to know that, as you mentioned, that you are very lucky you got a parents who really supported you. But in terms of when you play the game, then you sit in front of opponent, then do you believe that the luck really factors? You want something that this player play this, take this move, it happens. Like what is the do you give the credibility to the luck in your career path?
Well, there's the luck you deserve. So I mean that if you maximize your chances in a certain area, you work very hard even though you don't complete everything, then you increase the probability that if something unexpected happens, it'll still go your way. That's one kind of luck. But every once in a while, I'll have no explanation for why something went my way. And that of course is, well, you can't attribute it to anything, that's just pure luck. There is a part for luck in chess. Since a lot of chess is intuitive, whatever you can't calculate, you have to take informed guesses. You have to take informed guesses about what your opponent might play the next day. And such decisions work like that. Luck is a pretty important part. But of course, you have to develop all the skills that allow you to take advantage of it when it comes your way. So that much of work you can't just leave to fate. You have to actually do the kind of things that will give you that luck. So for instance, if I find that I'm suffering in certain areas, I'll need to work consistently on improving those areas so that when the next time it comes, even if I haven't solved it perfectly, still I might be lucky.
I think we'll just wrap it up. We're running out of time. Thank you.